Mother Holle. One time there was an old widow woman, and she had 2 daughters. One of her daughters was her stepdaughter. And this daughter was a beautiful girl. She was a very hard-working girl. And she had to work hard because her mother was very cruel with her. And she made her do all the jobs around the house. Now, her stepsister, she was sort of nasty. She probably got it from her mother. She was as lazy as anything. She would lounge about all the time. She would smirk at her sister, her stepsister, the beautiful girl, who was doing all this work. Because the mother used to make her make the tea and sweep the floor and clean the dishes and get a duster up to the cobwebs in the corner of the room. She even had to sew with a spinning wheel. The spinning wheel was usually outside in the yard and was beside a well. And this poor girl, she never had time to sleep, and the mother was always scolding her and giving out to her. And then when she would be spinning on the wheel, her fingers would be bleeding, and the blood would get on the reel of the spinning wheel. And she usually had to take the reel off and dip it into the well to clean it before she could continue spinning. She was working so hard. She got very little sleep at night. Anyway, one day, this girl, the beautiful girl, who was always working so hard and getting herself dirty from all this hard work, well, she's spinning away and her hands become bloody again. So she takes the reel off the wheel and she shakes it in the water of the well to clean it off. And guess what happens? She's so tired, she lets go. And the reel falls down through the water to the bottom of the well. She runs home to tell her mother what's happened, this accident, and the mother gives out and begins to scold her again. And of course her sister is sitting there up on the couch, filing her nails and smirking at her. The mother says, "You lost that reel. It's up to you to find it." So the girl was so upset and she went back to the well, and what was she going to do? And I don't know what came over her. She decided to jump into the well after the reel. Down and down through the water she went. And then she blacked out. She became unconscious. But when she woke up, she was lying on her back and she was all dry and clean. She opened her eyes and the sky was so blue and the sun was shining. And here she was lying in a meadow. And there were flowers all around, big sunflowers smiling at her. So she got up and she began to walk. She saw a building in the distance. It was a bakery. And as she got to the bakery, she realized there was no baker there. And then she heard these voices. "Help, help. We're in the oven. We're in the oven. We'll be burnt." It was the loaves of bread who were calling to her. "Take us out of the oven before we get burnt." So she got a baker's peel. That's a long, flat spade that the bakers or the pizza makers use. And she took all those loaves out of the oven and they weren't burnt. And she set them aside on a little table and she went off on her journey. She came to a field where there was a big apple tree and there were these lovely ripe red apples growing on the tree. And as she came past the tree called out, "Shake, shake me, shake me. These apples are ripe and they're heavy and our branches are bending down. Please shake." So she helped the apple tree out and she shook all the branches till all the apples came down like in a little rainstorm of apples. And then she picked all those apples up and she set them up in a little mound, neat and tidy beside the apple tree. And she went on walking. She came to a very, very strange house. And she noticed that the window at the front of the house was open. And she came up to have a look in. And inside that house, she saw a very, very old woman with really long teeth. And she got a fright. But then the woman spoke very gently to her through the window. She says, "Don't be afraid. I may have long teeth, but I won't harm you." So the girl liked the sound, the gentle sound of this old woman's voice. So she went into the house. And the old woman said, "Let me make you some tea. I have some cake here." And this woman was really nice. And she said to the young girl, she said, "If you stay and work for me, I'll treat you very well. You know, you won't have a lot of work to do, and I'll always feed you well, and you'll have a lovely soft bed to sleep in, and you can have a long, cozy sleep at night." And the girl says, "This is a nice woman. I'm going to stay with her." So the old woman tells her what she has to do, sweep the floor here and maybe cook something. But one thing, the woman said, "One thing you must always do for me. You see, my name is Mother Holle, and you have to prepare my bed every night. You want to shake out the eiderdown so that the feathers go all flying around. Will you do that? Because when you shake out my eiderdown, it begins to snow back on earth. So the girl said, fine. And she stayed with that woman, and she felt very happy there, and she was very busy. This beautiful girl, she was a beautiful worker. But she didn't have to work too hard, and this old woman never scolded her in the way that her stepmother had scolded her. But then as time went on, even though she was comfortable there, and she didn't have to work too hard, and she wasn't being shouted at and that, she began to feel a bit sad. And she didn't know why she was feeling sad. And then she realized she was becoming homesick. And one morning she went to old Mother Holle and she said, you know, I know it's wonderful living here and it's much better than where I used to live, but I really feel I should go home to live where my people live. And Mother Holle smiled and she said, I like that you said that. That's a good thing to think. And she says, I'm going to give you something to bring home. So she takes the young girl out and they come to a big oak door. And she opens the door to let the girl leave. And when that girl is standing under the door, a big shower of golden coins comes spilling down, hundreds of coins, and they all stick to the girl. So she's covered in golden coins. And she smiles at Mother Holle, says goodbye and turns to go. And then Mother Holle said, wait, you're forgetting something. And Mother Holle gives her the reel from the spinning wheel. And now it's all polished and shiny and clean. So the girl takes the reel and covered in golden coins, she goes home. She suddenly finds herself somewhere in this world near the house where she lived. And when she comes to the door of that house, there's a rooster, there's a cock in the yard, just near the well. And the cock begins to sing, oodaloo, it says, cock-a-doodaloo. Golden girl, what's new with you? So she goes in the door and there's her mother. When her mother sees all the golden coins, her eyes light up and she welcomes her daughter in and she gives her something to eat and she's not going to make the daughter work that hard anymore. And she gets a plan, this old woman. She wants the ugly, lazy daughter to become rich too. And the ugly, lazy daughter, she's a schemer and she says, yes, I'll go down to that strange place and I'll come back covered in gold. So she goes to the well where the spinning wheel is and she begins to spin, but she's not very good at it and she's pretending to spin and her fingers don't get bloody at all. So she pricks her fingers on sharp thorns so there's a little bit of blood and she smears that blood on the reel from the spinning wheel and then she drops it into the well. She dives in afterwards. She blacks out and she wakes up lying in the same meadow, golden corn and sunflowers and the sun shining in that lovely blue sky. She begins to walk and she comes to the bakery and she hears the loaves shouting out, help, help, take us out of the oven or we'll burn. Take us out of the oven or we'll burn. And the girl says, I'm not touching you. I don't want to get my hands dirty with flour. I don't want to get my hands burnt. And off she goes. And she comes to that apple tree and again the apple tree branches are bending down with all these ripe red apples and the apple tree says, shake, shake me, shake me. The apples are ripe and they're too heavy. And she says, I'm not shaking your apples. What if one landed on my head? And on she goes and she sees the house that she's been told about by her sister. And she sees the old woman there with the long teeth. And she's not afraid of the long teeth because she's heard that this is the woman who's given gold coins to her sister. And she knocks on the door. And she acts all sweet and polite and she says, oh, I'm wondering if you want anyone to work for you. And the old woman welcomes her in and gives her something to eat. And she says, well, yes, if you want to work for me, you can. I won't work you too hard. You'll have a soft bed to lie in at night and I'll feed you well. So the girl stays. And the next morning, when she wakes up, she starts doing jobs around the house. She sweeps the floor and she cooks. And then the next day she gets up and she's not quite as busy working. She begins to loaf about. And the next day she does hardly any work at all. The next day she won't get out of the bed. And then she says to the old woman, you know, I miss it at home. I'm homesick. I should really go home. And the old woman says, yes, maybe you should. But I have something for you. And she gives her the reel. It's cleaned up now. The girl takes it. And she comes to the door and the old woman opens the door and the girl stands under the door. But instead of gold coins raining down, a kettle full of pitch black tar pours down over the girl and she's totally covered in this black pitch. When she opens her eyes are the only bright things in this black lump. And she staggers away, and she finds herself back in the land where she's from, near the mother's house. And as she comes into the yard, the cock crow begins to sing, "Cock-a-doodle-doo, dirty girl, what's new with you?" And she goes to the door, covered in black tar and pitch. And you know, they say that she had to wear that black tar for the rest of her life. That's what the story says.